Welcome to Unplanned and Untold, a podcast that dives into the real life, unexpected twists of facing an unplanned pregnancy in college. Join us as we listen to the unplanned and untold stories of those who have overcome the odds in order to achieve their goals. Welcome back to another episode of Unplanned and Untold. I'm your host, Caitlin Willing, and today we have an amazing guest with us. We have State Representative from South Carolina, Melissa Oremus. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Welcome to the podcast where everyone spills the beans about their unplanned pregnancy story. I think, listeners know by now what they're going to expect as far as our stories go. And with you, you had an unplanned pregnancy pretty early on in life. Is that right?
Yes, I was 16 years old.
16. So take me back to the high school days. What was life like right before you got pregnant?
Well, I was your typical teenager, just hanging out with friends, doing pretty well in school, pretty much the top of my class. I was kind of a know-it-all, and which I'm okay with that. I was like part of a lot of clubs. I was in the band, academic teams, things like that. Cheerleaded for a little while as well. So, I mean, typical high school girl,
Wow.
and started going out and hanging out a little too much after hours, and ended up getting pregnant. But I didn't know for a couple of months that I was actually pregnant. I just
Okay.
had been sick, and I went to a friend's house after school because she kept telling me, she said, "Melissa, you're pregnant. You're throwing up. You're throwing
Oh
up
my
all the time."
gosh.
And she said, "I happen to have a pregnancy test. My mom has one under the bathroom
Oh,
sink. Do you want to take it?" And I was like, "Sure, let's see what happens."
oh my word.
And so I went into the bathroom, of course, did that, and I came out and I just fell to pieces. And I was just in shock, didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. I kept it to myself for, a
Wow.
couple more weeks before I said anything.
Wow. And who was the first person that you ended up telling?
Actually, it's part of my family. Of course, my friend that was with me after
Yeah.
school knew about it, and trying to tell a teenage girl not to tell anybody
Right?
else is so quickly. All of my friend group knew what was going on, and they kept saying, "What are you going to do? Are you going to tell your family?" And
Oh my
I
word.
had actually went to tell the baby's dad
Okay.
the night that I ended up telling my mom,
Okay.
and but I was crying and upset, and I was in a car accident
Oh my
that night.
gosh.
And so I landed on the side of an embankment, and I crawled out the side of the window of my car and
Oh,
walked to a random person's house, and and called my mom. And she's like, "Where were you? You weren't even supposed to be where you were supposed to be, and you're supposed to be out to dinner with friends." And I totally not told the truth. And
oh
so she come to pick me up, and I'm sitting there crying on the side of the road, and
my
I was, throwing up and sick. And she said, "Why do you keep throwing up?" And I told her right then. I said, "Well,
gosh.
I'm pregnant."
Wow.
And so it hit the fan pretty quickly after that. And after that I went to the doctor and all those normal things that you do.
So in that moment, what was your mother's reaction? I mean, I'm sure she was shaken up by the fact that you were in a car accident. Like that's got to shake her to the core as a mom. I can only imagine. And then on top of that, honestly kind of great timing with that news because I feel like if
Yeah,
I was
she's
going to
glad I'm alive.
right, she knew you were alive and I'm like, wow, if I could think of the best timing, it probably would have been then.
Right.
What was
It's
her
like,
how did she react?
well, at first she was just like, "Oh man, I'm glad you're okay." And then she was concerned about the car and
Oh,
like the
just
damage
a
I'd
little
done to
bit.
the car. And I think she was in shock. And then finally on the way home, it was kind of a quiet ride home. And she just kept saying to me, "What are you going to do about this? What are you
Right.
going to do about this?"
Right.
And I was like, "Well, it's not the time to really talk."
Yeah.
And I had told my sister like the week earlier, and she'd promised that, the family would be supportive and help me through it. My sister was older,
Okay.
and and so I had prepared myself for this conversation, but I didn't know it was going to come out so quickly and so abruptly. And I wanted to break it a little more gently, but I think
Yeah.
it worked out. She's like I
Yeah.
said, she's glad I'm alive, and she's thankful for me, so
Exactly.
now she won't kill me.
Yeah. Near death experience and now we don't have to
Yeah,
worry about mom.
exactly.
So walk me through how finishing high school was for you then. Was it embarrassing? Did you go to school with a pregnant belly? What was that like?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough that my expected due date was not until the summertime.
Okay.
So most of my pregnant time, you couldn't really tell that I was pregnant. So going into the summer months, like I said, you could just thought I may have gained a little bit of weight,
Right.
but you couldn't really tell.
Okay.
But the people who did know, of course, it spreads like wildfire in school. And, and I had girls bullying me. I mean, because I
Oh
was
my
very
gosh.
secretive about it. I didn't really
Yeah.
spill the beans on, who the child's father was and things
Right.
like that. So I had a girl, I remember, push me against a locker one day and say, I heard my baby daddy or my boyfriend is your baby daddy and this kind of thing. And it wasn't the truth. And, just got violent with me. And then I had someone else, I was walking past a school bus walking to my car one day and somebody said, I heard she, got knocked up by so and so. And I got on
Wow.
that bus and I guess it was the hormones raging and I said a few choice words to that girl. I was just angry. I was angry
Yes.
at myself because I was worried about my future and
Right.
everything else. But I was, like I said, I was at the top of my class. I had planned to go to college. I had done all the things. I mean, I grew up pretty poor. And so I knew my only way to escape my life was to do better for myself. So
Wow.
I always had that in the back of my mind academically. I had to excel to change my life. So,
Wow.
I mean, I just did the status quo and just kept up with my studies. And she actually was born the first day of school my junior year,
Wow.
or the weekend before I was supposed to start school. So I was out of school for like 4 weeks on
Okay.
homebound and then came back quickly. But one of the things that was most alarming to me is that when I told my guidance counselor at school that I was actually pregnant, she said, "Well, go ahead and clean out your locker before you come back and we'll send all your stuff." Like I was not
Wow.
coming back.
She just assumed.
She just assumed because other girls
Wow.
don't that and I'm like, "I'm coming back."
Right.
What are you saying? I'm finishing school. I'm doing
Yes.
this thing. And so for any young girl in that position, you want to be encouraged and
Of
to do your
course.
best. And as a guidance counselor, I mean, that has always stuck with me, her words to me,
Yes.
and probably made me work a little bit even harder to prove her
100%.
wrong. And I don't think that was her goal, but I think
Right.
she had just seen so many other girls in my position where they just gave up and said,
Absolutely.
this is the end of my life. And
Right.
yeah,
Sometimes it's those statements that fly out of people's mouths that end up fueling us to even reach farther than what we imagined. And I had the same experience even in college. People thought I was done. People didn't want me to represent, an on campus club because it was shameful what I was going through. And it is wild to see the stigma that surrounds unplanned pregnancies. It still exists to this day.
oh, very much so. They just assume there's something wrong in your life, or you did something wrong, or you're a
Right.
bad person. And how did you mess that up?
Yes.
And a lot of people you just don't know they did it. They took care of it, or you just don't know
Exactly.
all the circumstances that go into it. But yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, fortunately, as women, we're able to bear children, and that's the
Yes.
consequence of sex.
Exactly. And we know on college campuses and even in high school, people are going to continue to have sex. That is something that is just not going to stop. And so the resources have to keep up with what's
Correct.
going on. We need to address, there is a population here that is underserved and forgotten, and they're not going anywhere. It is going to continue to happen. And so it's time that we stand up and embrace this population and let them know they can succeed. So, with hopes of going to college, what did that look like? Did you have an almost 2-year-old at the time?
I did, and struggling to figure out which college I wanted to go to. I mean, I had full rides to go at certain places or had
Wow.
scholarships to go all over the place, and I knew I looked into it and there was no housing for girls with children that were
Yep.
not married for like certain
Right.
Christian colleges or things like that. I couldn't live on campus. And being in the financial position I was in, I could not afford, the high tuition and housing as well. So I
Right.
knew I had to figure something out. So that's when I hunkered down and worked 2 and 3 jobs and lived in a small single wide trailer down the road from school in
Wow.
a pretty scary trailer park at the
Yep.
time. But I made friends with my neighbors so they knew who I was and tried to stay
Right.
safe as I could. And just did it. And it was my day to day. And my professors, they knew that if daycare was closed, I wasn't going to be at school. So, I mean, I was so fortunate enough to have my professor say, "Hey, Melissa, just bring her to class with you. Bring her
Right.
crayons or
Oh,
puzzles, whatever she
so
needs to
awesome.
keep her occupied." And she
Wow.
quickly became like a mascot for people
I
at school,
love
like, "Oh,
that.
Brooke's here. Oh, she's here today." And
Oh
they,
my
they would
goodness.
call her up to write on the board and do different things. And
Wow.
I can't say that's going to be every
Right.
person with a child's scenario, but
Right.
fortunate I was fortunate enough for that to be the case for me.
Oh,
And I joined a local sorority, and those girls
wow.
became like my family as well, my sisters, and extra babysitters if I had to work late, and became my
Wow.
extended family. So when they say it takes a village, that is a very true statement.
Absolutely. And we've interviewed many women who have not had that kind of support on college campuses. And that's the hard part because it kind of all depends on the professor and
Hmm.
their willingness to accommodate your special requests or needs. And I remember going to my math final and not having childcare for my son and wheeling him on in his little, stroller and leaving him with my professor as I went inside to take my exam. And I couldn't tell you how much that impacted me. And it sounds like, these professors have impacted you greatly for accommodating you.
Yeah, very much so. And just knowing that they cared enough about my future, and knowing that was the best place for me to be, and not giving up and saying, "You can do this, you can." There's a lot of people that go back to school later in life that have families, and
Right.
I had to find my support system. And I think that's where a lot of girls are scared to ask for help,
Yes.
but you'll be amazed to see when you just ask how many
Mhm.
people are willing to be a part of your team. And I have a young girl that's in my life now that she was an employee of mine, and she doesn't have the child's father in her life, and
Right.
she's trying to get a job, find childcare. And so it just reminds me so much of me. And
Yes.
I've told her, don't be scared to ask. Don't be
Yes.
scared to ask. And if you need a mommy moment just to break down and cry and find yourself,
Right.
call me, because
Yes.
I totally get it. I totally get it.
It's so true. It can be very isolating because this is a walk of life that it's hard for people to relate to unless you've really walked it. And I've said this a million times. I feel automatically connected with a lot of the women that are on the podcast because we share something that helped shape us into who we are. These women have overcome such a tremendous obstacle, a lot of them with no support, and it's built our personalities. It's built this grit and determination that has transpired into adulthood with us and with you as well. I mean, once you graduated, what were the plans after that? Because you've made an amazing career for yourself.
I had all kind of big dreams and goals. I wanted to be in advertising. That was
Okay.
my main goal. And I'm going to move to a big city. I'm going to help write commercials. And I've always been witty and funny. And I like a Geico commercial was right up my right up my alley. But God has different plans for every
Yes.
person. And I happened to my senior year in college, I had kind of sworn off dating, and had my life together. I had figured it all out, and then I happened to meet my husband now. At the
Okay.
time, I was in DC and I met him, and so as soon as I graduated, I moved to Chicago. What
Okay.
better place for advertising than
Right.
Chicago? And quickly I got slapped in the face like, little girl, you have not paid your dues. Who do you think you are? So working job to job, and I had been in banking all through college, my college
Okay.
days and years. So that was kind of a great fallback. I just was managing banks, but I knew it wasn't my passion and what I
Right.
wanted to do. And unfortunately, my passion has changed many times. Hence, I'm now in the political arena, which I never saw coming. But
Right.
I think we're some people are called to serve in different capacities,
That's
and you
right.
feel that calling on your heart, and you know that you're not in the place where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I've done many different things. I've been a business owner. I've like I said, did banking. I currently own several small businesses. But when the opportunity came to serve in the state house, I had run for another political office some years prior. Didn't work out. It wasn't my time or my
Gotcha.
plan. And then this opportunity came up, and I knew what I wanted to represent, and I knew the people in my community what they needed, and I ran a grassroots campaign and ended up,
Wow.
winning that. So now I'm a voice, not just for, my community, but hopefully I'm a mentor and a voice for young girls that went through the same thing, to let them
Yes.
know that your dream does not have to stop the moment you
Right.
find out that, you're pregnant. And so it can go forward, it can be successful, and it's how hard you're willing to work. And a lot of people say, well, you were fortunate, you had this and this, but I made that scenario happen. I
Right.
I had the drive and the go, saying, okay, I have a person that I'm responsible for now.
Right.
I can't give up. She's
Right.
watching me, she's emulating me, she's eating because of me, all these
Yes.
things. And so, I knew quickly that I had to fight harder for her.
Absolutely. Does your daughter have any memories of you still in college or, working those late nights?
I think so. She tells me all the time she remembers like this, and this, and she's proud, which that always makes a mom happy, because
Yeah.
she's gone on through college. She's already graduated college. She's 28 now. She's living on her own in New York, which I hate
Wow.
that, but she's in the city. And
Yeah.
but she tells me all the time, she's like, Mom, I'm thankful that you did A, B, C, and D to get
Wow.
here. And she's like my little best friend.
Oh my
She gets
gosh.
it, while her upbringing was very different
Sure.
than mine. And she doesn't really remember, she just knows that I provided for her. And so
Right.
the struggle, the nights where I cried and was up till 2-3 in the morning writing a paper or doing with that, she doesn't remember that. She doesn't
Right.
remember that struggle. She just knew she had, a bed and food and a mom that loved her and picked her up
Right.
whenever she could. So,
Oh my gosh.
and so that's what I'm thankful for. Is, you're always worried about not being there enough for your
Right.
children and the sacrifices you have to make. And I so get it for the moms and dads out there who are struggling, and they, barely see their children right now, or whatever their sacrifice is. It's, you got to let them know there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and
Absolutely.
you'll eventually get there, and they're not going to hate you
No.
for working hard.
Not at all. Looking back at your unplanned pregnancy experience and all the hurdles that you had to overcome and the hard work you put in, do you feel like that time in your life shaped you into who you are today?
Oh, most definitely. Like I said, it's the drive, it's the work ethic, it's the
Right.
never giving up. If I want something, I know I have to make it happen, even if
That's
the
right.
obstacle or the goal is like sounds too far away, or like, oh, that probably won't be, my plan. I am a pretty spiritual person. I am a prayer warrior when it comes to things, but
Yes.
I always want to make sure it's best for me, best for my family, and if I want it bad enough, I'm going for it. So
Absolutely.
it has shaped me. So, and I don't take to the words no very very well, and maybe that's not a good thing. It makes me work harder.
Oh, I feel like that's a common thread among the women that I have interviewed is we are very strong-willed, and this was just an obstacle that we knew we could overcome. And in that moment of finding out you're in an unplanned pregnancy, sometimes it's hard to see exactly how this is going to pan out. But man, I haven't interviewed a woman yet that was like, "Man, I totally regret going on this journey." There are always all these lessons that they've learned and ways that they feel like they can impact the community even further, like you're saying, because you've experienced what other hardships women have experienced as well.
Right. Everybody wants to hear how you got from point A to B. They don't want to just hear your overnight success, or
Right.
you woke up with a silver spoon in your mouth. They
Right.
want to know what it took to get there. That's the
Yes.
story. That's what the character is. That's what, when I go to and speak at different things, people, not so much about my politics. They want to hear how I got to that point as a
Yes.
woman in
Yes.
that field. And I think that's something I'm learning really quickly, because I've never been you know, uh, a feminist or anything like that. Like,
Right.
when I've never thought about a glass ceiling. I've never thought about those things until I'm actually living in that world now, where people are just shocked that a woman is doing the things that I am doing. And I'm like,
Yes.
how impactful is that? And so I see girls now, and I tell them how I, came to be, and they're blown away by that, because they're not seeing it. And there's like a great quote I heard, like, look where you are 5 years from now, or look back where you were 5 years now. You could never see the person that you are now. And I think about that all the time. Just 5 years ago for me, before my political life, or
Right.
just before that. And so it's that option is there for everyone.
Right.
And so, like I said, it's about the journey, and that's what shapes us into who we are and makes us good people, I think.
Absolutely. And imagining a world where almost every college campus has a baby steps, how do you think a baby steps on your campus would have impacted you?
Oh my gosh, just the community support,
Mm,
right there, just knowing there's other moms going through that. While I was in college, I mean, I knew a couple other moms, but they were older.
right.
Most of them were married, had families. There wasn't a lot of girls like me
Yeah.
and still trying to have a social life and still be a part of campus life and wanting to be a normal college kid that just happened to have a 2-year old following behind her,
Exactly.
and to be able to say your main goal is to go to school and get your life together. Oh my gosh, what an advantage that would be. And so when I heard about it, I was sold from the moment, because it took me back to those nights where I just cried and cried, like, how am I going to get through this? There's no
Yeah.
support, there's no help, there's nothing. It's just
Yes,
me. And and to me that would be just a godsend, and it would allow other girls to know that, yeah, my dreams aren't over just because
exactly.
I'm pregnant now, and and I've decided to keep my child. So I think
Exactly.
that's it's a win. It's a win for everyone, and it's empowering. It truly is, to say, hey, your life matters and
Yes.
you can do it now. And so anyway,
Absolutely.
I'm just giddy. I could talk about it all day.
I love it. I love it so much because it really is history changing in the making. I mean, to be completely honest, we really are trying to change the way that communities, societies, colleges in a whole look and respond to unplanned pregnancies. And no woman should really have to go through this by herself. The support system is there. We're going to get baby steps across the nation. Before I die, I would love to see it, kind of like YMCA. Everyone knows about YMCA. There's a
Right.
YMCA in every town. That's the hope and the dream for baby steps. And our team is working tirelessly to see that, happen across the nation. And I get excited because it's the time for females to step up and voice what we've gone through and say no more. Be the voice, kind of like you said, you have the opportunity to be the voice for women who
That's
don't
right.
feel like they have one. And so many of the voices have been silenced for so long. And sometimes that stigma sticks around. I'm so impressed that with the platform that you have, you still talk about the hardships and you talk about what happened having an unplanned pregnancy. Whereas sometimes it's tempting to pretend like it never happened, and you get married and you can just move on and pretend this is how our life was always. Nobody really knows.
Right.
But how honorable for you to really go back and share your entire experience.
I think too, like, when I talk about my family and I tell the age difference and I say I have a 28-year-old, a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, stepdaughter?" I'm like, "No, my daughter."
Yeah.
And so the wheels start turning immediately, but I've never been ashamed to say that.
Yes.
And I think, for some, maybe they're like, "I don't want to talk about that part of my past because it was painful." But
Mm.
like we talked about before, it's who shaped me. That's what shaped
Yes.
me.
Yes.
And so, yeah, not ashamed about it at all, but I'm proud of that being a battle wound or a scar on my body
Yes.
to talk about later, to say, hey, this is how I overcame, and everybody can do
Absolutely.
it.
It's like that quote, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. And I
Correct.
truly believe in that.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, so my last question for you would be if you could, talk to somebody who's had an unplanned pregnancy, they just found out they're pregnant, they're scared. What advice would you give them at this point?
Well, first, stay calm and find somebody that you confide in, or you just need to talk to about, because you need to have somebody in your corner, no matter what decision thought process you're going through, because this is such a scary time. Everybody in my life is just saying, just get rid of it. You don't
Right.
need to do this. Your life will
Mm,
keep going on. And that was a struggle for me, and I just didn't feel that was the right decision for me. And so going forward, I had to just stand up for myself then. You
right.
have to stand up for what you want, and
Yes.
worry about what everybody in society tells you. You have to stand firm on what's going to make you happy at the end of the day, and that, that conflict inside, and just stay the course and know there is a path out there. There's a path forward, but don't just get in line with negative people that's going to tell you your life is over, or that
Right.
guidance counselor that told me to clean out my locker that, I'm pretty much done. Here's your options for
Yeah.
jobs.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the negative voices. Listen to the positive that tells you there's a path forward. And
I
if
love
I could
that.
ever be that and mentor any girl going through it, I love to hear that. I know we got different programs that are out there that, young teenage mothers, and what are they going to do, and how are they going to see a path forward, and I pray that I'm that voice for them.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your heart with all of us and our
You're
listeners.
welcome.
Really appreciate you. And we hope to work with you, in the future.
Yes.
And we've got some things, under wraps and under work right now. We won't share too many details about that, but some really exciting things hopefully coming down the pipeline for baby steps.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, we'd love to have you back next week for another episode of Unplanned and Untold. Bye-bye. Do you want to be a part of an organization that is the first of its kind to empower student moms? Your support can impact generations to come. Consider making a financial contribution at babysteps.org.